Matt Gilmore sitting in for Aaron Rand on this Friday. It is 3:38. Time to welcome in Amanda Lang, CTV News Chief Financial Correspondent. Hi, Amanda.
Hey, Matt.
Thanks for doing this. Obviously, the big story today is the unemployment rate. So what can you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, the question coming into today was whether we would see the strength continue. We had 2 months previous showing gains, and it did, in fact, continue. More than 54,000, in fact, new jobs in November. And that's pushed the headline rate down. So our unemployment rate actually dropped to 6.5%. From 6.9%, a big move lower. As always, there's a couple of cautions I would offer up, and one is this is a survey. It's not perfect data, but we track it month to month, and this is at least generally positive. Under the hood, we see it was mostly young people getting jobs and a lot of part-time, so that's good for young people who needed them. And then wage growth is still quite elevated. So, we look at all of it and we would say things maybe aren't as bad as we had feared, although we'll have a little asterisk because some economists are a bit perplexed by why we're seeing this kind of strength in the labor market.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you have any insight on that. All we hear is doom and gloom about the economy in the future, and it seems we're adding jobs. So
yeah, I mean, I can't tell you exactly what's happening, but what I would say is our economy and the U.S. economy, by the way, has proved more resilient than a lot of people feared around the trade stuff. And that we've seen businesses pivot. And it's a good reminder that the vast majority of our GDP is driven from domestic trade. So things like services that we provide to one another, work that we do inside this country. So exports get a lot of attention, but actually our economy might actually be able to skate through this a little bit. And that's important because the trade stuff is continuing. Although we still have the bulk of our trade covered by the existing trade agreement, those sectors that are being hit, including steel and lumber, some in the ag side that are still being hit with Chinese tariffs, these are really hurting sectorally, but broad-based. This does look as though maybe there's a little bit more reason for optimism than we thought. Well,
let's talk about that broader free trade deal. CUSMA is going to expire next year, I believe, and today the leaders of the three countries signed onto that agreement were in Washington together for the FIFA World Cup draw. Trump did say that they were going to meet and talk about immigration and trade sort of on the sidelines. And so, this is all kind of happening under the backdrop of a Politico report that said that Trump is considering just letting the deal expire.
Yeah, one of Trump's trade reps, Jamieson Greer, apparently told Politico that, one option is just to walk away. To me, I think we should not make too much of that. That is obviously one option. It's the nuclear one. It's bad for the U.S. to do that, as it is bad for Canada and Mexico. So is it a negotiating tactic? Maybe. What we do know is getting talks restarted is important. It's on the minds of our government and the Mexican government. And there are signals here that we're going to get back on track. We went a little sideways, of course, recently after the Premier of Ontario ran an ad in the U.S. market that the president didn't like. If we can get talks started again, then it sort of at least puts us in motion. And it's honestly, Matt, anybody's guess whether we end up with a trade agreement that looks at all like the one we have. But my guess would be that it doesn't, that we will see some new areas of tariffs, that we'll see a little more friction than we've seen in the past with NAFTA and the CUSMA. So businesses still have to kind of wait and brace themselves for some changes. But again, maybe they can manage it. Maybe they're resilient. NAFTA will get some answers in the next, 6 to 12 months.
I was going to ask if there's a timeline for when exactly does CUSMA expire?
So the window is it's actually 2028, but 2026 is sort of the window to negotiate, and there's an option for early removal. Okay. So that's the sort of threat that hangs over us. And there's also, by the way, one thing we've heard is that even if they renegotiate, they could put in a sunset that's much tighter, like an annual renewal, which would be very bad and not be good for business confidence. So it's a very complex negotiation. And so, again, it's been happening in the background. Anything that Trump says or any politician says day to day, there are people who've been working on this for, weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's ongoing, and we wish them well.
And if this was to expire, like, I know that the consequences would be huge, but could you sort of put into perspective, like, how big the consequences would be for Canada's economy if this whole thing was to expire and they didn't renew?
Yeah, I mean, look, economists have done that, and the Bank of Canada has done it as sort of the worst case scenario. It would be an enormous drag on our GDP, and it would be a permanent setback in our economic output. So, it would be, you'd look for like a contraction of our whole economy. I don't even like to speculate about it, Matt, because the likelihood that we don't get some kind of deal, I've been sort of, in my own mind, I've been thinking, imagine it's 10% across the board. Which is what the UK has done, with then a bunch of carve-outs, and then kind of sort of work from there. And that's obviously it's more than we're doing now, but that's not fatal. It's not, the 35% stuff we've been dealing with as these kind of punitive tariffs go on lately. So we could adjust. It's all the more reason to be thinking about new markets, building your internal domestic market strengths, getting rid of those trade barriers internally so that we can build our markets here at home, and just sort of, getting that answer as soon as possible. For businesses, in some ways, they'd rather know and have it be 10% than have the uncertainty linger indefinitely.
Right. Well, speaking of new markets and new trade partners, there a couple weeks ago, Melanie Joly, the industry minister, was talking about potentially throwing out the F-35 deal and going with Saab, who make a similar fighter jet for Canada's contract. There was a promise of 10,000 aerospace jobs in Canada if the government was to go with the Swedish company. But now we're hearing from some industry expert that's maybe a little bit of fiction there, or that we should maybe be doubting that number, 10,000 jobs?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they said 10,000 aerospace jobs. I think they said 10,000 jobs. And that's the reason I make that distinction.
That's fair enough.
Because you asked the question of, why do we want to do that? Well, the Swedish company is looking for another place to manufacture. They could go somewhere else. Getting them to Canada means not just business for the company that they partner with, so that could be Bombardier, but all of the companies that then feed into the supply chain, all of the, you think of the huge range of businesses then that are affected, including, and this is where it's hard to measure the value of these things, but we've seen it in the U.S. with their big defense spending and how that turns into the internet. We know that big spending on technology and R&D has kind of externality spin-offs that are beneficial for all of us. So bringing the research here, the scientific expertise, building up our own base of that knowledge, that's all pretty valuable. So you can see why this is I'm not saying they should do it, and Lord help us if the debate around the F-35s continues any longer, but it's definitely valuable having this kind of manufacturing in our country.
All right. Amanda Lang, thanks very much.
Always good to talk.
Canadian women are looking for more out of themselves, their businesses, their elected leaders, and the world around them.
And that's why we're thrilled to introduce the Honest Talk podcast.
I'm Jennifer Stewart.
And I'm Catherine Clark. And in this podcast, we interview Canada's most inspiring women.
Entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, politicians, and newsmakers, all at different stages of their journey.
So if you're looking to connect, then we hope you'll join us.
Listen to the Honest Talk podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you listen to your podcasts.